Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our February 1st edition of Track Announcer's Notebook. If you're joining us for the first time, my name is Pat Gonzalez, along with my co-host and producer, Stuart Nodell, and our two very special guests tonight, Alan Labrosse and Stu Shaw, who were part of the team that won that big national at Brainerd, Minnesota over 35 years ago. We're going to talk about that race weekend that was certainly magical, and also the rest of Alan's racing career, not just on two wheels. We'll touch on some of his tremendous accomplishments in car racing as a racer, a track manager, track owner, manager, and promoter. Lots to cover tonight. But first up, we've got our Nodell's Notes for a Monday night. Stuart? You're muted.
Sorry, that's my fault. I couldn't reach the button quickly enough. Just in some recent news, Jordan Oakes signed back on with Canadian Kawasaki, and looks like he's going to attempt to get his 15th national championship for 2021.
Yeah, that's amazing that Jordan is in some ways just as fast as he was 10 years ago. I believe this is a brand new ZX-10R that they're going to be building into a superbike and looking to kick off the CSBK season in June at Grand Bend Motorplex. We hope to have Jordan on in the next 2 or 3 weeks to talk a little bit about his race program and the quest for Superbike Championship number 15.
And just having a... And then the other news is that the Daytona 200 entry list has been issued. I know you shared that with me, Kevin Elliott, this past week, Pat, so we can get to the list as well. It's good to see that the race is on. There's some familiar names. I did just get a note from Pat Barnes, actually, that although Darren James is in the entry list, he's actually not going to be in the race.
Yeah, and we'll look at some of the top American and European riders who will be there. Unfortunately, for our Canadian contingent, that would include Darren James, Pat Barnes, and Alex Coelho, who were all at Daytona last March. And of course, the race was postponed to October, canceled in October. But with the new restrictions for travel out of Canada, it would take almost 5 weeks for any rider to go and race for 2 days at Daytona and run the Daytona 200. Of course, I made the decision a while ago that it wasn't feasible for me to go there. So doesn't look, unfortunate, we'll have any Canadian riders for the 200 unless a miracle happens in the next few weeks. But they do have a very deep field for the 79th Daytona 200. Kyle Wyman there, he was the 2019 winner. And in all, there are 6 former Daytona 200 champions. Josh Herron won back in 2010. Josh Hayes won in 2008 on the racetrack, but subsequently was disqualified, and that win was handed to, let me see, Chaz Davies, who is currently racing World Superbike. Go ahead, Stuart, if you got a couple of other names. Okay,
we do. We've got some of the mileage guys that are chasing that record, so some of these guys are in the field as well.
Yeah, John Ashby, the 89 champion, he is the a mileage leader for the Daytona 200. These numbers courtesy of Don Emdy, who continues to track the mileage. And there you see that guy who is in 7th. We know him. I don't think Miguel will get more than the 2039, although we'll talk to Alan about a deal Miguel talked to us about where he was originally looking at a ride for last year's Daytona 200, but it obviously didn't happen. A couple of the other riders entered for the 200. The 4-time winner, Danny Eslick, looking to become only the 3rd rider to win 5 Daytona 200s. He's got a good shot. Also, Jake Lewis on the number 85 machine has entered. Sheridan Moraes, a top world supersport rider from Portugal, is entered. And we'll see how that entry list fills out. Michael Barnes, another former winner. He won in 2016. And also The only Ducati rider to ever win, Jason DeSalvo, is also entered. So sadly, it doesn't look as though there'll be any Canadian riders, but it looks like the 200 is going to attract a very strong, talented field, and probably looking at somewhere in the vicinity of about 70 riders is what we're projecting right now. We'll continue to update it as we go through the month of February and head to the March 13th Daytona 200. Stuart?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. I'll just add one more name to the list, since I know they'll want us to acknowledge him, is Carl Soltys, the Azra Sport Bike champion. He's also entered in the field officially.
Yeah, a lot of good riders getting ready to run.
And then some new news that came out just at the end of last week. Jake Lewis has signed on with the Altus Motorsports Suzuki team to ride in the Stock 1000 class in the Moto America Championship. So
yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
So that's just the next question would be, where's Cameron Peterson going to end up? Because the Suzuki Superbike ride is still available, but I guess the BMW ride is available as well too. And I know some of the names being bandied about are either Cameron Peterson or even PJ Jacobson.
Yeah, and still waiting to get confirmation on Alex Dumas as to what he's doing in Moto America next year. Likely he'll spend another season in Stock 1000.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then in the Supercross action, Ken Roxon was the big winner at Indy on Saturday night. And it was a close race between he and Eli Tomac, who finished second, and Cooper Webb finished third. But they both had their issues. Eli Tomac had crashed earlier in the race, and Roxon had run off. But they did end up going neck and neck, but Roxon did get the better of him.
And again, they'll be racing tomorrow night back at Indy. And of course, then look to head to Daytona on March the 6th for the Daytona Supercross.
And then the other news, just to follow up with, that the Volusia Half Mile during Bike Week is the doubleheader from the American Flat Track Series. And then we have the Toronto Motorcycle Film Festival. They're having, you can basically submit your movies between now and the summertime, but the show is actually scheduled to go between September 16th and 23rd of this year. And if COVID is under control, but there will be in-person viewings, but based on how things are going, they also do have the option of doing it virtually online.
Yeah, I think it's the middle of July, the deadline for submitting an entry. And I've attended most of the Toronto Motorcycle Film Festival, some incredible films every year. We invite you to check that out. Stuart?
And then this is the first picture of our special guest. I'll stop the share now so you can talk to Alan about his storied career.
There you go, on number 316. Alan, I don't think you had a preference in terms of what competition number you used. I think that's maybe 1981 on number 316, but you had 188, you had 7, you had 27, a whole lot of different numbers. What is there a story behind the numbers you used when you started racing?
Well, I did start with 316. I don't know why I had 316, to be honest with you. And usually it had to do with the AMA. You know, sometimes, and I would be going back and forth AMA and then coming and racing in some select Canadian races. So I would usually just go with the number that I got from the AMA, and I would usually just keep it for the Canadian races. But preferably it would have been 27. I don't know why, other than Gilles Villeneuve maybe had an influence or something like that. But, you know, they gave me, I took the numbers that they gave me.
Okay. So 1980, you're an amateur rider. You win the CMA 125 and 250 championship your very first year. But go back before that. How did you get started in motorcycling? At what age, and what were you doing? Motocross, or how did you get to that 1980 season ready to win 2 CMA road racing championships?
I started riding motorcycles around 15 years old, relatively late, I guess, you know, but not in any competition or whatsoever. I mean, I'd go riding, you know, in the fields, you know, little XR or XL 70s, Hondas and stuff like that. So, and you know, my family was not really motorcycle friendly, you know. So, you know, my father basically told us, you know, the day you arrive with a motorcycle is the day you should be looking for an apartment, you know. So, but I went around it a different way, and you know, eventually they found out that I was racing. But I mean, basically, I started riding at 15 years old, and I got my license at 16 years old. But it was just like mini bikes, you know, XL 70s and XL 175s, and then I bought an XT 500, a Yamaha XT 500. And my father was upset, but he wasn't upset because it was a 500, because he didn't know it was a 500. I basically took all the numbers off of it, and I told him that it was about a 250, you know. So you know, and which was a mistake. But anyway, he was upset, but he never kicked me out of the house. And I used to ride on the street. I used to do a lot of stupid things on the street. You know, I was the wheelie king back in the day, and you know, very how would I say, irresponsible stuff. But at the time, in those days, we did a lot of stuff that was not necessarily sensible. And I started working at a motorcycle dealer, which was Daytona. Daytona Motorcycles became Moto International, and things just started. I had my XT 500. There was this guy had an RD 400, which was totally modified. And then the guys downstairs in the shop said, "Why don't you guys do a drag race?" So they started. We would go from one street light to the other street light in front of the building on the street. And you know, I told the guy who was RD 400 that I would kick his ass and blah 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 and all that stuff. And so once in a while, every week, all the mechanics and guys in the parts department, everybody would be wagering. You know, they'd be putting money down on who's going to win and so on and so forth. And I ended up beating him often. And then one of the guys from service, he says, "Why don't you come out to San Air and see a road race?" I didn't even know what it was, a road race. I had no idea what a road race was, you know. So I went out there with a friend, and I seen some little 125s that sounded like mosquitoes, and I says, "Hey, you know, maybe this, it looked like fun." So I went to watch a race at San Air because one of the mechanics at Daytona told me, you know, come out and see what it's like. And that was the fall of 1978. And then I raced amateur production in 79. My first race, Pat, was at Shannonville Motorsport Park. It was in the rain. There was two guys. There was a guy, Jeff McMillan. There was Paul McMillan. There was this other tall guy, not Rick Jago, but another tall guy that was riding in Kawasaki Triple L. He was really fast. But basically, it's 1979. Yamaha just came out with the Daytona Special, RD 400 Daytona Special. And I line up there, my first race. I paid $200 for the bike, okay? I had a Kawasaki 350 triple with drum brakes, 1972. This is and I was racing in 1979. So I go to Shannonville thinking that, hey, you know, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, you know. So, but all I remember was it was a race in the rain. We must have been, I don't know, 40 or 50 bikes on the grid, and I ended up finishing sixth. But I was just lucky because it was in the rain, you know, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was just trying to go as fast as I could. The drum brakes seemed to work in the rain, so I finished sixth. And after that, I had a dealer sponsoring me, and they loaned me an RD 400. I didn't do very many production races because then I bought a GP 120, a little, what did they call it, an RS 500. They weren't an RS 500 back there. It was something
MT.
else.
I think it was at MT.
Yeah.
MT 125.
Yeah, MT 125. I bought an MT 125, and that was the end of 79. I raced a couple of amateur races, and I did well, maybe won, I think so. Then I did a race in Mont Tremblant, which is the fall of 79, and they made the amateurs race with the pros, and I won the race. So after that,
Who are the experts or pros you beat that day? Do you recall?
Jean-Yves Ferland.
Yeah, Jean-Yves was a great rider from Quebec.
Yeah, I remember him. He had a 125 modified, whatever. And I don't know who the other riders were. I don't remember who they were, but that was the fall of 1979. And then I got really prepared for 1980. And I says, you know what, I'm going to do a full season. And 1980, I had a 125 and a 250, which was an older model 250, a TZ 250, but an older model. And I raced amateur. And back then there was 2 series. It was a CMA series and there was the Brimaco series.
Yeah, Richard Eastfeld was running that in Quebec and some races at Shannonville.
Yeah, and I remember winning championships in CMA and Brimaco, or I don't know how you pronounce it, but in that series too, I won some championships, 125, 250. That was 1980, and then 81 I turned pro, and I bought 81. What did I want? 81. I remember I bought a bike from Clive Nigakeen, which was a TZ 250F 1979 model. You know, Pat, I didn't know it. I still didn't know what the hell I was doing. I liked Nigakeen's bike. He went fast on it. I liked the colors. We bought that bike. I didn't know what we were doing, but then, you know, after that, things went very, very quickly. You know, very, very fast. I mean, I had literally no racing experience whatsoever, and I did one full season of amateur, and then 81 I won the CMA 125, 250, 500 championships, and I did well in the race series. I went to Daytona for the first time in 1981. So
do you remember how you did at Daytona that year? Are you running the international lightweight race?
Yeah, international light race, novice, I think it was, because it was like novice and expert back then.
Right.
And it's actually Craig Hill that I had some 250 that was sponsored by Castro. It wasn't really a really fast 250, which was a big handicap at Daytona when you don't have a fast bike. And where I finished, I don't know. I definitely didn't do very well. I probably finished it. I think I finished in the top 20, but I mean,
okay.
You know, to me that was not very good.
So that was your first year as an expert / pro rider. Now you move on to 82, 83, and things start to get a little bit more serious. You're doing some racing up here, but you're also doing a lot of racing in the United States in the 250, or I think at the time was called Formula 2 class, and it was extremely competitive. What do you remember of 82, 83, maybe even 84 in 250? Well, any race stands out?
82, there's a couple of races that stand out. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 82, I was doing very well. Ron Lefebvre was tuning my bike in 82, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And I remember a good race, but I crashed my brains out at Riverside, California, where I was dicing with Fred Merkel. You know, I was, you know, things went too fast for me. I mean, in those years, like I say, I went from an amateur to a pro, racing in the United States against guys like Dave MD and Fred Merkel, and I don't know, 82, 83, there was Sam McDonald, Donnie Green, Jimmy Felici. And these guys a lot of them were from California. They had a lot of racing already. They were racing flat track when they were kids, basically, you know. So I really didn't have very much experience, and but I was able to be competitive. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I remember West Palm Beach. I finished on the podium there too, and the two guys ahead of me were Jimmy Felice and Fred Merkel, which was, you know, pretty decent company, you know.
Yep, future world superbike champion.
Yeah, and then 83, maybe, you know, Stuart might have to come in for my memory lapse, but '83, I think I did only select races because I chose to go do a couple of World Championship GPs in 250. We went to Silverstone and we went to Anderstorp in Sweden. So I didn't do as many races because it took a lot of money to go to Europe, you know,
Yeah.
and that's '83, I think.
Yeah. So Alan, in '83, those two World 250 Grand Prix races, did you qualify for both? And what do you recall in terms of the results?
I failed to qualify at Silverstone by very minute, like maybe a 1/10 or maybe 2/100ths, or it was
Yep.
very, very, you know, like they took 42 riders and I think I was 43rd. So I mean, I didn't make the cut. We lost time in practice and in practice there at Silverstone because we shipped the bike there and we were always doing all of these things with practically no budget, you know. So we didn't have much money for tires, and you know, it's crazy when it's ludicrous when you really think of it. You're competing at a world championship. You're flying from Canada to England, and you can't really afford tires, you know. So and I know we had an issue because I think we put a set of tires on that were the tires that were on the bike when we transported because they were brand new when we sent it, you know, in the plane and all that stuff. And there was an issue with the tire because it had I was getting a lot of chattering on the front end, and so we lost time with that, which basically cost us the opportunity to actually make the final. So no, Silverstone, we didn't make the final. The average speed was 114 miles per hour a lap. So it was a very, very, you know, the tracks were different back then and they were very fast. Like you can take Silverstone back then and compared to today is very different. You take Laguna Seca back then compared to today, very, very different tracks. You know, like Laguna was very fast. There was a couple of places there that you didn't want to go off because you were really, you know, like Mosport. You know, Mosport back in the day, now I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I remember 1985 when I rode the RS 500 at Mosport. It was scary stuff, you know. The back straight was a tank slapper from one end to the other. But anyway, I don't want to skip ahead too much. But so yeah, '83, and then we went to Anderstorp. And Anderstorp, we did qualify. I think we finished 21st, either 21st or 23rd of 42 starters, which is decent. You know, it was a good experience. You know, at least today I can say that. You know, I did Canadian national races, I did AMA national races, and I did a couple of World Championship Grand Prix.
Yeah. So Alan, in '83, earlier that year, in checking my Don MD book on the Daytona 200, you started the 200 in '83, finished 18th on a Yamaha. Was that a 500 you had rented?
Yeah, that's a 500 we rented from, I don't know where we rented, an American guy that owned that thing. And that's because '83, like I said, you know, like we were trying to do things not too expensively because I was saving all I could to go and do the two Grand Prix that we needed all the monies that we could have to go to Europe. So yeah, I rented a TZ 500. It wasn't very fast. The TZ 750s were quicker. It was a pig, you know, so.
Well, there's a guy you might know by the name of Kenny Roberts who won that year, and they had those, I think they were 780cc two strokes. They were rocket ships. I want to bring in Stuart Shaw because, Stuart, you can maybe fill in some of the blanks here. Did you go over to Alan to England for the two Grand Prix races?
Yes, I did. Yeah. And you know, to be fair to Alan, I think most of the time, whenever I handed him a bike, it was capable of winning. But Silverstone, oh man, there was no way. And for a lot of different mechanical reasons. But I mean, you know, new place, you couldn't get good gas because over here we had Cam 2 and, you know, some of the other stuff. And of course, you know, maybe maybe people don't understand, but when you mix two-stroke oil with gas, it lowers the octane level, and then it makes it prone to detonation. And the gas in Britain that we were buying, we were getting it from the airport, and of course mixing it with gas and lowering the octane, it was already lower than what we were used to. So, you know, the thing was just destroying the motor. And I can remember Alan coming in from the last session. He says, "I'm so pissed off." He says, I haven't qualified because I've just ridden my ass off. If I haven't qualified, I'm just fed up." And I thought, wow, that's something. So then I poked, while I was, you know, looking at the bike and stuff, I poked around in the pits and I found this guy named Hans Hummel. And he sold me these barrels that didn't have the power valve in them anymore. And it had different porting and stuff like that in the cylinder. So I put those on for Sweden, and the thing was way faster. And that's why we qualified.
Yeah. And had a pretty decent finish. What do you remember of that 83 run at Daytona on that Yamaha? Obviously, it's a 500, no match for the Yamaha TZ750s in 83.
I have to agree with Alan. Of course, Alan and I were not together at that point. I had gone down with Ron, and I was, because at the time I was working at Rocket, I was looking after Steve Galbraith on his 250. And Ron was looking after Alan's 500. And, you know, Ron didn't want anybody else to touch it or anything. But yeah, you're right. It was a pig. It was a slug. It was definitely not the same bike that Kenny Roberts won the world championship on. I can tell you that.
No.
Okay, I want to go to 1985 at Brainerd because I had the honor of announcing that race. The only race I ever announced at Brainerd, and lo and behold, a Canadian wins the race. But I want to go to Stuart Nodell because I think we've got some questions and comments that have come in the Q&A. Stuart?
You can go ahead, Pat. I can cover these at the end because they're just with regard to some of the stuff that's going out in Nova Scotia. So we can wrap that up at the end.
Okay, awesome. So Stuart, and I think we've got Pat Barnes on the call tonight as well. You and Pat, Stuart, were in Brainerd. That's a bit of a long drive from the Toronto area with the bike. Alan, as the rider, flew in. Recap that weekend for you that ultimately led to the Formula One win at Brainerd, Minnesota. And I looked at the results. Dan Shivington and Booney Knott were the other guys on the podium that year with you, Alan. And surprisingly enough, I think you had battled with those guys in a lot of the 250 Grand Prix races. So it was sort of an event with all the DNFs where these 250 riders also came to the forefront. Tell us about Brainerd Labor Day weekend over 35 years ago and the win.
Is the question addressed to me, Pat?
Either one of you. You were both there.
Go for it,
Al. I'm going to bring up something. Maybe Stuart, you can remind me. But was that the year that I hit a bird, and there was a bird stuck on my handlebar? Or was that on a 250?
No, I think that was 250.
Okay, so it has nothing to do with it, because sometimes they say you hit a bird, it brings bad luck, or a bird hits your window or something like that. But you remember that though, right? That I had a bird stuck on my handlebar. No, okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that was the year of the 250. Okay, so the 500. I don't remember all that much, but I mean, I do remember that Randy Renfro was leading, and I was in second. I don't know where all the other riders were. Like, I know Pat mentioned something that Wayne had some issues with his fuel, racing fuel too. I think they had some engine issues or something like that. I don't know. I don't think Mike Baldwin was there. Maybe he had already wrapped up the championship. So, I can't remember it all. I have a recollection that Randy was actually in front of me. Maybe for the first half of the race or whatever, or I think he crashed. My recollection, it was turn 3. That's where I remember seeing him off the racetrack. I think it was turn 3. That was a very fast track. Brainerd was fast. The corner 1 is fun. For corner 1 was really, really fun. It was like it was like flat out. I don't know, man. I can't remember if we dropped one gear maybe or whatever, but it was fast and fun, and maybe a little bit sad or whatever. But Brainerd, Brainerd was my last race, was my last motorcycle race, and earlier I was saying that things went really fast for me because I went from doing wheelies on the street on an XT500 to racing RS, 125s and 250s and 500 GP bikes and so on and so forth, in a very, very short span, from 1980 to 1985, like 85 was my last year. So, back to Brainerd, hey, it was a great way to finish, maybe sometimes I think that, yes, I did quit early, I guess you could say, or I did retire early. I don't really have any regrets with it whatsoever, because at the time F1 was starting to fade out and superbikes were coming in. I wasn't I'm not a very big guy. I'm still not very big today, so, maybe I could get accustomed to the superbikes, but back then, to me, when you had a taste of riding an RS 500, why in the hell would you want to ride a superbike? So yeah. That was and there was other things going on, like the sponsor Motoplan, Raymond David, he owned Shantyville, he owned Spenard David School, he owned the racing team, and he was kind of pulling me towards, why don't you try automobile racing? So there was a lot of things going on, and but Brainerd was, hey, I'm, it's funny. We're here 35 years. It's 35 years already, for Christ's sakes. 35 years. I'm sitting here in front of Pat, in front of Stuart, the same three amigos, I guess you could say. Not to say the Three Stooges. We're not the Three Stooges. So
if we include Pat Barnes, you can say that.
Oh, yeah. Pat Barnes, excuse me, Pat, I don't know if you're online or whatever.
He's online. We may even throw him in here. But Alan, just to get through the Brainerd story, you went there. And for those who don't know Brainerd, that front straightaway is the drag strip. So it's a drag strip racetrack, but the rest of it almost like Saint-Air. And the AMA ran there for many, many years. Moto America is actually going back in 2021. So I'm sure that'll be a great event. But in '85, that was the year that Daytona switched from running Formula One as the premier class for the 200 to Superbike. Although the rest of the nationals that year were based on Formula One. And then I think '86 might have been the last year that they ran Formula One as the big national class. But after that, it was all Superbike. So going to Brainerd, knowing, Alan, that it might be your last race, that you were looking to maybe move into car racing and move on from road racing, did you ever think you could win that, looking at the talent that was there, Renfro, Rainey, and some of the other riders?
Yeah, I mean,
why do you let me take?
Okay, go ahead, Stuart. You tell us what was going on there in the paddock that weekend.
Well, first of all, I'll start. I mean, I could fill an hour with just the stories about the stuff we've been through. But anyway, when Alan arrived off the plane, he was dead serious, and I could see in his face that he was going to be dressed to kill for the whole weekend. And we had, Pat and I had done a good job at, preparing the bike and everything. So when we unloaded it out of the trailer, it was pretty fast. And I remember Schlachter and Alan going up the front straightaway, and Schlachter was trying to draft Alan, and he couldn't draft him. And Alan's tire picked up a rock and smashed the windshield on Schlachter's bike. And as Schlachter came back into the pits, he kind of looks at me like, your guy did this. But anyway, so the whole weekend went well right up until the last practice session on the Sunday morning before the race. And where the RS 500, it has forward facing carburetors. And of course, the air intakes for the fairing are on the sides. And it had a lower section of the fairing that was sealed to the top section of the fairing with a big piece of foam rubber across the front. And, from, running the bike and the gas oil mix and stuff like that, that rubber sometimes gets a little kind of slippery. And going up the straightaway, the air pressure on the front of the fairing pushed that little rubber strip in on the one side. And of course, we got raw air going in there, which isn't supposed to be that way. And it causes that cylinder, which is one of the two up cylinders, because you got two up and one down. It's one of the two up cylinders, and it causes it to blow up and seize. So while I'm, this is the last session, I go right away. We knew something was wrong because Alan didn't come around, and I was just afraid that he crashed. But I went right away to the corner marshal, and I said, "Can you tell me where my rider is?" He says, "Oh yeah, he's down in the back by corner 3, and the bike stopped running. He's okay. He didn't crash or anything, but he's upright." So right away, I knew what had happened, and I thought, okay. So I said, "Pat, get all these tools ready, and get all this stuff ready. I'll go out and get Alan." So I took the mini bike and rode over to corner 3, and then pushed Alan all the way back. And then Pat and I ripped it apart. I used some muriatic acid on the cylinder to clean off all the aluminum. We put in a used piston with a used ring, and got it all back together and buttoned up like just before they went out for the warm-up lap. And of course, the rest is history. The thing ran great. It was pretty bulletproof. Alan rode the wheels off it and just drove away from everybody. And I think if you guys read that Cycle News article, it says he went from the second row and he was in the lead like right away. So the whole thing was pretty cool. And Pat and I were just freaking out, just jumping up and down, and it was just amazing.
Yeah. Wow.
Who bought who bought dinner that night in Brainerd, Alan?
I don't know, but I'm going to say I bought dinner every night.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. And I'm sure you had to buy a beer or two for Pat Bart's. So Alan, that obviously was your shining moment. What a way to cap off the season. You also won the AMA Pro Rookie of the Year in Formula One. So a great cap on, as you said, a meteoric rise up through the ranks to capping it off with that win. The very next year, you get into F2000 open wheel racing, and you end up second in that championship, actually beating Paul Tracy for Rookie of the Year. How did you make that transition from Formula One 500cc Hondas to an F2000 open wheel car? Did you take a car school? Who was your mentor moving to car racing?
Well, it was, I took a car school, and I did a couple of car school races. Richard Spinard, who was my teammate, he won the championship, and I finished second in the championship. And I won the rookie thing. And Paul Tracy, there was some fast drivers there. How do I do it? To be honest, I would probably say, after coming off a Honda RS500 GP bike, getting into a car, like you're not afraid of anything, basically, you could hit a wall, and I felt like, even if you fit, you're like you're boxed in, you're caged in and all that stuff. There's really no fear, there's no fear in a car, anyway, me at that point, there wasn't, and it was an F2000. It wasn't a Formula One car or an Indy car or something like that. It was a lower level, open wheel car. So it was, lap times were fast. They were very fast. I remember my lap times in the Formula 2000 were faster than the RS500, if I'm not mistaken. Not because of top speed or anything like that, but the cornering speed was fast. And, I wasn't afraid, and I think, and I had some racing experience, because by that time I had done, 5 years of very, very, very competitive motorcycle racing, so, who I was racing against, you know, Paul Tracy was younger than I anyway. He was 17 years old. He was just a kid, you know. So, but he was crazy. He was fast, but it didn't really matter because I wasn't intimidated by anybody. I know it was another new world, and we did the Canadian Championship, and then there too, I went back to Britain and I did the BBC series in Europe, in England, in the fall of 1986, and you know, I beat guys. I beat Eddie Irvine and I beat Johnny Herbert. You know, all these guys. It's the same thing. You know, I had good races against good motorcycle racers. Yep. Whether it be Mike Baldwin or whether it be Wayne Rainey or whether it be Fred Merkel. You know, a lot of these guys, they went on to multiple world championships, and in the car, I did very well there too. There was a write-up in a magazine last month about the races that I did back then, and you know, I finished fourth on a couple of occasions there. Blah. Anyway, so, but I mean, car racing is money, you know, and by that time, you know, when I went to Brainerd, yes, I had fire in my eyes. You know, I remember that, what Stuart was referring to when I went there. I was really focused, and yes, I pretty well knew it was going to be my last race, and you know, couldn't have imagined a better scenario. You know, finishing on the top of the box, and you know, it allowed me to win Rookie of the Year, and it allowed me to finish third overall. I mean, third overall. It was the championship that year was won by Mike Baldwin, if I'm not mistaken. I think second was Randy Renfro, and I was third. So again, there, you know, I consider I was in
good company there.
Company.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, Stuart mentioned Richard Schlachter, a very, very, very nice guy, Richard Schlachter, Dan Shimington, all these people. You know, they were good racers.
Yeah. So, Alan, 1986, as short as your motorcycle road racing career was, your car racing career was even shorter. 1987, you start to move and gravitate into the business world surrounding road racing. Raymond David gets you at Shannonville. You're running the show there, the Spinard David Racing School, the racetrack, and of course, working with somebody that will always be special to me, John Nelson. What was it like taking over and running Shannonville with the likes of John Nelson for all those years?
John, I love the guy. You know, I literally loved John Nelson. At first, there was some issues because I was thrown in there. You know, I was no longer racing cars. I did 3 Players GM races that year because Spinard would go race elsewhere in Europe and I would replace him. And I remember battling for third place with Ron Fellows at Sauternes-Villeneuve in the Players GM car. Even there, Pat, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. It was a 5-speed. I never put it into 5th speed. I didn't know there was 5 speed. So, I mean, you know, I would rev the shit out of it in 4-speed, and anyway, Ron Fellows beat me that time. But getting into the management stuff, Raymond liked me. Raymond always thought, he says, you know what? He says, you don't have university degrees and all that stuff, but he says, what you do have is you have a degree in common sense. That's what he told me. He says, you're a young guy, very motivated and so on and so forth. And he says, you have a degree in common sense. I need somebody to look over all of my motorsport stuff. But, you know, which was the school. I was the founder of the FAST Yamaha school, which is owned by Michel now today. But I mean, originally I'm the one that founded that school with Raymond David's money. Okay. And created that school with Yamaha and other sponsors. And then I was thrown in management at Shannonville. And I was even thrown in even further when Jack Bostrom did an ultimation, or you know, like he basically told Raymond Davis as well, I'm going to quit. And Raymond Davis will get fine, quit, you know. So then he threw me in as general manager of race. It's all when talking about it this evening makes me realize that a lot of things went very, very fast. My automobile racing career, if you can call it that, it lasted one season. Did very well. I won, like in CMA back then, motorcycles, but they had that for cars too. There was one national runoff race, which was done by the National Sporting Authority. It was at Tremblant, and I won the race, okay, in Formula 2000. So literally, I finished second in what at that time was the Canadian Tire Formula 2000 Championship, a 10-race series, behind Spinart, which is, there's no shame there, and ahead of guys like Bourbonnais and Tracy and some other Americans and so on and so forth. And then Tremblant, I did the race there and I won there. So I won the national runoffs. So I was national champion, but it's, one race win. And then Shannonville, Raymond was sponsoring a young, really, really up and coming driver who won in Europe. His name was Bertrand Fabi, which basically Shannonville, the backtrap, is called Fabi, which is named after Bertrand Fabi, who won Formula 2000 Championship British and Europe, and was then signed on to a Formula 3 team. But unfortunately, Bertrand killed himself in a private test at Goodwood. That had a lot of effect on Raymond David, and Raymond called me in one day and said, that's when he started to talk to me about managing his properties and no longer racing anymore. And, Chantal and I had our first child in 1986. So, Jason was born, and the fact that Bertrand lost his life affected Raymond. Raymond didn't want to go through that again. And he was close to me. So he says, why don't you take on the responsibility? So then John Nelson was managing the track. I became track manager. So to get back to John Nelson, well, originally there was a little bit of some cold friction, understandably. John Nelson built that racetrack, owned that racetrack, managed that racetrack. And then this young kid, because I was 25, with literally no experience other than being a former motorcycle car racer, but no experience with people management and event management and all of that stuff. Again, I was thrown in. And so, there was some times where I'm sure that John, with reason, would say, what the hell is this kid doing here? We don't need this kid here. I can manage the thing, So I was more, I think in the first times, I was more of a nuisance but I was Raymond's guy. Raymond owned the track, and Raymond trusted me totally, and he says, I know you can do it, and go and do it. So I moved from Montreal to Belleville, and then, started managing the racetrack. And then Jack Bostrom gave his resignation or got fired. I'm not sure what the real true story was, but basically him and Raymond had a dispute. And Raymond called me up. I'm in Belleville. He says, you got to go start running a race. And, basically you're not the manager of the racetrack. You're the general manager of the racetrack and the race series. Go to the offices over there, of which Jack Bostrom's wife or girlfriend at the time was the assistant. It was weird. I'm staying in Toronto. My wife's living in Belleville. She's pregnant, 8 months. And I'm living in a hotel in Toronto for a couple of months, for working there from Monday to Friday and then coming home on the weekend. And it was challenging. I had to learn a lot in everything, every time, whether it be racing the bikes, racing the cars, going to the AMA stuff, all this, and then learning the management stuff. Everything was happening quite fast. But you know what? I think we managed okay. We made it. We made it. I'm a totally happy individual. So that's good.
And Alan, during that time, you also now start to manage Miguel Duhamel and later on Pascal Picot, the Bostrom brothers. How did you get into rider management? And take us back to Daytona 1991. How much of a role did you play in securing that ride for Miguel to win his first Daytona 200 in 1991? Because I think Randy Renfro plays a role in that as well, as
Yes,
he
he
did
does.
in your win at Brainerd,
Yeah.
6 years earlier.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, I started managing rider. I was, general manager of the race series, and I seen Miguel come through the ranks in 1987. He was an amateur. 88, he was his first year pro with Monet Sports on a Kawasaki, and 89 signed a deal with Suzuki with Bruce McCarr. Remember, is it Bruce
Yeah,
McCarr?
I remember Bruce McCarr.
Another crazy individual. Another. I don't know
Mark
where he is
Jeffrey
now.
on the line will remember Bruce McCarr.
So basically, I seen Miguel come through the ranks, and I went at one time. I went to his place, his parents' place. It was in December 1988, and I told him, I says, what Miguel needs is, he needs somebody to help him sign some deals, sign some sponsorship stuff, and I wasn't, I fared reasonably well, better than the majority when I was racing, with regards to securing sponsorships and stuff like that. I'm sure, I don't know if Stuart's still online, but I mean,
Yeah, he's there.
The whole Motoplan thing was, it was pretty big deal back then,
That was a really good deal.
I mean, I don't know. I can't remember, Stuart. I mean, if we were paying you or Motoplan was paying, I don't know how it worked back then, but I think you were treated better than the average mechanic, I think, so, I went back in December 88 and I sat down with Miguel and his parents, and I says, I think I can help you guys out. I know a lot of people in the industry, whether it be in Canada or in the US, and we started working together immediately. And, that was 89. And then 1990, he rode for Yoshimura. At the end of the season, in the States, at the end of the season, they sacked him for no reason. So we're the fall of we're winter 1990, December 1990. And Miguel doesn't have anything. And then Randy Renfro was racing for Martin Adams, and he was testing at Willow Springs, and he had a very unfortunate incident, a crash that caused some injuries to his. He lost he lost his thumb or his finger, and he was going to be out of action for, I think he was out of action for most of the year, if not the full season. And here's Miguel sitting here, with no ride. So, I can't remember if I called Martin Adams or he called me. And anyway, we spoke, and, it's funny because we signed Miguel with Martin Adams Commonwealth Racing. He wasn't signed with it was indirect American Honda, but it was like, Commonwealth was the American Honda Superbike effort. And Miguel, we signed him to Commonwealth for $5,000 for the year.
Wow.
That was his deal, $5,000 for the year, and he had bonuses for contingency bonuses for winning and finishing top three and all that stuff. And he goes to Daytona, and he's racing both classes. 600 he wins, and the Superbike he wins. So I mean, he started, Miguel started off with a bang, and I was really happy because I was still pissed off that Yoshimura, basically, they never even told him. They never even told us that, hey, we're not, we only found out when they signed. I don't know who they signed back then. It might have been Sadowski or the Florida rider. I can't remember what his name was, but anyway, they signed on some other riders, and and so I was really pleased that, hey, winning Daytona, wow, and that was a start to an exceptional career for Miguel. Like Miguel had an exceptional career, like a very long career. Most riders are in and out by the time they race.
6 years.
Yeah, I
6
was gonna,
years.
yeah, about that. Like a football player. Like they have these careers, but they're not all Tom Brady's. So Miguel won that and went on to do wonderful things. And it allowed me to hone my skills, I guess, or whatever, or experience of managing professional racers, and that brought me on to the likes of Ben Bostrom and Eric Bostrom and Pascal Picot and Steve Crevier a little bit too in his latter part of his career, Jordan Zoe for a little while too, and Carpentier, Patrick Carpentier, and Tagliani and Andrew Ranger. And I was with a guy last year. I was managing a racer last year, Raphael Lessard. I'm not with him anymore, but he's racing NASCAR trucks now.
Yep, I saw that. Very talented driver.
He's a very good kid. He's very talented, very, very dedicated. He has he has everything. He has all the ingredients, with the exception of money, which is unfortunately so important, mostly even in motorcycle, not in motorcycle, in automobile racing. So, but he's signed with GMS, which I was part of that whole deal. But I'm not working with them anymore. But I wish him good luck, and so. You guys mentioned Alex Dumas. I heard you.
Off the top. Have you talked to him?
So I've spoken with Alex a few times, and I've spoken with his dad quite often. More like actually since maybe November, I think, this year. So I've been on and off, talking with them, and there's some things that are in motion for him in Moto America, but it's not looking that favorable, to be honest with you. So he's working on some other things which I really should not disclose, because it's more for them to disclose it. But you're going to see him racing, and you will see him racing Moto America, but I'm not sure he's going to be doing the championship or maybe just select races. And there was some really interesting stuff going on for Alex, but there too, it's quite challenging in the U.S. now, and then I've been out of it for a while. So, but I'm getting the feeling that I don't know. I might be totally off track here when I'm saying this, but it seems like it has its similarities to automobile racing, where money is required. It's changed a lot since, like I was back in the day when Miguel had Camel, RJR, and, you'd go out and have dinner with the president of RJR. And, there was some good days back then, but that was tobacco influenced, I guess you could say. But it seems like it's a little bit different. There are, I don't know, maybe there's half a dozen, maybe there's a dozen racers that are earning a living in the United States, maybe 3 or 4 that are doing a little bit better than most, but all the rest are having to chip in some money, I think.
Yeah. Alan, you mentioned Miguel Duhamel. As you know, we had Miguel on the show last week, had a wonderful hour with him. And Stuart, I think, has managed to edit some audio of that 1999 Daytona 200, where I think you were there. Miguel was walking with the cane, literally being lifted onto the motorcycle, and he ends up winning not only the sport bike or the super sport race, but the Daytona 200. So we had a whole bunch of photos there we wanted to share. Alan, we're going to have to get you back on another show. We want to talk about St. Eustache. We want to talk about some of the other parts of your career. But for our show tonight, we just wanted to go back and have everyone who's online relive just a little bit of that classic 1999 Daytona 200, Duhamel and Matt Mladen in an absolute war for the win.
That is that goes down in history. That race goes down in history. Miguel probably, maybe should not have been racing with the injuries that he had sustained during the previous summer. The complications of reoperating his femur, his leg. He was walking around with a cane, and it wasn't Halloween. I mean, but Miguel's a really, I had a privilege to work with Miguel for so many years, because he was a very tough customer for anybody that had to compete against him.
Okay.
And his win over Matt Mladen is in that race where he stole that race. Well, I shouldn't say that he stole it, because he earned it, but I don't think he had the advantage with regards to the bike and so on and so forth. He had a good bike, good team, but he outsmarted Mladen, and deservedly. That race is historical. For the condition that he was in, and having won it, it's one of the top.
Let's see if we can hear that audio. Stuart?
The audio. Sorry, Pat. The audio's not picking up.
Okay, that's unfortunate. Okay, we're gonna try to fix those technical difficulties and bring it to a future show, because it was really, really cool reliving that race over 20 years ago. Alan, we've got to wrap up here, because I know you got to get back to your barbecue and whatnot. But take us through. We're going to jump ahead a few years through your years as promoter for IndyCar and Champ Car racing in Montreal, and then not only get inducted into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame in 2007, but also the Motorcycle Hall of Fame in 2012. And it was in 2007 you bought Saint Eustache. And what was that experience like? Because you just sold the track. Your timing, as always, is impeccable. Right in the middle of COVID, the deal closed last year, and I'm sure you're glad you no longer own a racetrack.
Yeah, I'm glad that I don't own a race. Well, I would, if I could, if I was wealthy enough, I would still like to own a racetrack, because both our sons were working there with us, and it was a very enriching and very life experience. So I'll go back to the Molson Indy 2004. First year I was promoter and producer of that event. I bought it from Normand Legault, who was the Formula One promoter for many, many years. And, I had a good relation with Normand. And at one point he didn't want to have that race anymore. And so he sold me his company that owned the rights to operating that venue, which is a Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. And so he sold me that, and for practically nothing. So, but there was a lot of responsibility that came with that. There was a lot of obligations. There was a lot of money. I mean, the 2004 Molson Indy cost $6 million to produce.
Wow.
I mean, of that, if my recollection was, I think it was 2.6 or $2.4 million US sanction fee. And then you had to have corporate sponsorship. You had to sell suites. You had to sell tickets. It was I used to be brave on two wheels, and then my bravery switched to promoting. And I don't know if it's bravery or gambling, you know, because I used to gamble my life sometimes on two wheels. Because to go through Brainerd turn one flat out on a 500, you have to, or to take the back straight at Mossboard in the condition it was back then, and literally practically no hay bales, it was guardrails, or racing on the streets of Long Beach, the Grand Prix of Long Beach, on a 250, where I finished on the podium there, and Gilles Villeneuve bought me the tires to do that race. You know what I was saying earlier? I would go to all these races, but I had no money, you know, so I went, anyway, I'm getting off track. Molson Indy, 2004, I bought that from Legault. I did the event. I bought it in April. The event was in August. It was quite challenging. Everything is similar. I mean, I'm talking to you this evening, Pat. It just makes me take more full conscious that I would always jump in the deep end. You know, I jumped in the deep end motorcycle racing. I jumped in the deep end relatively in car racing. I jumped in the deep end managing and then taking on race. And I jumped in the deep end promoting the Molson IndyCar race, a $6 million thing that I bought in April, and the race was in August. It was very challenging, quite stressful to be honest. Then did the race again in 2006, but I was no longer the producer. I was the executive producer. Basically, it's Champ Car that wanted to hold on to that. They wanted to hold on to that venue. And, you know, it's funny because Normand Legault sold me the rights, and he's the same guy that took the rights away from me when he brought in NASCAR in 2007. So, because it was the nationwide series back then. Yeah. 2000 and 2004 Molson Indy, 2007 Champ Car Grand Prix, all very expensive, very gambling stuff, which I did okay with all that stuff. And then 2007 I was practically semi-retired. In all honesty, I was semi-retired. It was the year that I worked the least in my lifetime, was 2007, which was welcome because all of these things that like Miguel, managing Miguel and Pascal, and Miguel having him get on a private jet to go and get his leg operated, and getting injured in Suzuka testing and all that, it is stressful. Fortunately I'm not and I don't, I'm people who know me, they all realize that they don't know how I do, because it was stressful, but I'm not very stressed, so that's a good thing. And it's probably why I do all these things, because, taking on the Molson Indy in that short notice is, I mentioned the word gambling. So, and I used to gamble a little bit, when I would go to Vegas with Miguel and all that stuff, but I realized that I started to like it too much, and that's not a good thing. So I can gamble for the fun, but there was a point where it could have gotten out of hand. It never did, because two sides of my brain. I have the gambling side, and then I have the logical
rational side.
And I'm sure, yeah. And if Stuart's still online, I'm sure he's saying to himself, he's probably saying, that's the Alan that I know. I was, very aggressive gambler, or very, I wouldn't say smart, but strategic, I guess you could say.
Stuart, we've got to wrap up the show here in a couple of minutes. What is the Alan Labrosse that you know? And do you look at Brainerd, of all the years you worked with him, was in fact his shining moment before he moved on to other things?
Yeah, I would have to say absolutely. Alan was always really, really smart as a racer. We had a kind of a connection. I could look at his face, and I could almost tell what he was thinking, and I could tell what strategy he wanted to pursue for the race. And we kind of talked a lot, and when we were traveling to the races, we used to talk an awful lot, and we got to know each other really, really well. And at that time we were similar size. So, yeah. When I set up the bike, I mean, I was setting it up for me, and it worked for him. So, yeah. him, his father, his mother, Chantel, right from the get-go, they treated me like I was family. I always felt like I was Alan's kind of big brother and sort of protector. And we had a great relationship. And yeah, Brainerd was amazing. I mean, I knew when we lined up on the grid, I knew that something wild was going to happen. And I could see it in his face.
Yeah, that was awesome. Stuart, Nodell, I want to share the photos. I know we're going a few minutes over time here tonight, but for those of you who are able to stay with us, we really want to show some of these images that we have put together. So we'll get, there you go. Some of his car racing exploits working with, there's the Bostrom brothers, Eric and Ben. Alan and Miguel, of course. There's Steve, a young Steve Crevier and a young Miguel Dumel.
Yeah.
And that's a special photo from Shannonville. Alan and Colin Fraser, of course, who worked so closely together for many, many years. And I believe that is Crevier and
Miguel. It's
on
from a
73
GP.
and Miguel.
Yeah.
Miguel on the podium with Pascal Picot and Michel Mercier.
Yeah.
And Alan, there you are leading the mini road racing or the pocket racers, I guess these were at.
There's
I think that's at Shannonville.
Mercier's behind me, and there's Paul McMillan, there's Milo, and Murphy.
Norm Murphy,
I think.
Tony Marchese, Roger Mendoza.
Holy wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's Gilles Villeneuve's brother, Jacques Villeneuve, sitting on my
that's
bike.
Jacques. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that Granby?
Yeah, that was at that's Granby. Yeah, where we passed Art in the final. Where you remember that, Stuart? In the last corner there.
Yes,
I passed
I do.
Art. I remember. I passed him on the sewer. You know, there was a sewer plate there. You know, between him and the wall. And I'm sure he said to himself that nobody, no. I don't know how to say it, but you know, Art was probably saying you would have to be an idiot to pass there. But he found his idiot. It was me that time. So.
Okay. And Alan, here the official, we just go back one page, Stuart. I just want to highlight a couple of the other riders. There's your win on September 1st, 85 at Brainerd. We mentioned Dan Shivington, Booney Knott. There was Randy Renfro, I guess after running off, he finished fourth. And Miles Baldwin, there is a great Canadian rider.
Yeah.
I have not heard about or heard of Miles Baldwin in decades. And the late Jimmy Adamo was seventh that year. And there's Dave Schlosser, who was another rider on a Yamaha TZ 750. Just looking at some of the, there you go. Henry DeGao, who is on the call tonight. Henry on his Yamaha TZ 750 was 16th that year. Rich Schlachter and some of the Sam McDonald, of course. And there's Wayne Rainey. I guess he did not, doesn't look as though he finished the lap. So 31 riders that year. And Alan, just a great ride and a great way to cap off your racing season. And as a fellow Canadian, it was an honor to call that race. And there's Stuart and Alan some 35, 36 years ago.
Wow. Where is that? Where's that photo taken? Stuart,
is that Daytona, Stuart?
That's Daytona.
Yeah, I think it is Daytona.
That's Daytona?
This is the Colin Fraser photo.
Okay.
Colin actually forwarded a lot of these.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Colin Fraser. We're going to have him on a future show. And we'll get that audio of the 1999 Daytona 200 sorted out, and we'll try to play it on a future show.
Well, thank you, Pat, and I'm glad to get to see Stuart a little bit on this Zoom and go over all these memories. And it's an honor to be sitting and talking with you guys this evening.
Yeah, Alan, you were always a gentleman, always enjoyed calling your races. And I know not only have you done an incredible job in your racing and management and track ownership and promotional career and all the other hats that you've worn, but you know, your wife Chantal, your kids, I know your daughter is an incredible actress doing very, very well. Your sons were amazing tennis players, and I'm glad you managed to keep them all out of motorcycle road racing. But
And so am I.
before we go, Stuart, I'm going to go to you. I think we've got some news on what's happening at Atlantic Motorsport Park and a bunch of other news before we wrap it up.
Yeah, they've just we just were notified that the round at Shubenacadie is scheduled. It has a specific date, but due to COVID, if there's quarantining and so forth required, that'll probably put that race in jeopardy. But well, it's a wait and see at this point. So that's really the only update there. There is a date for them. I think it's their typical date. I'm not sure what it is.
It's July 31st, August 1st weekend. As of today, that race is still a go. And we'll see whether or not they can have fans as we continue on almost a day-by-day basis to stick handle through this pandemic.
And then Pat Barnes put in that Jimmy Allen bought dinner that night in Brainerd.
Okay. And the beer?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There's a guy we're going to get on a future show, Jimmy Allen. I want to do a reunion of the Yamaha Motor Canada team that Jimmy was on back in 1973, and out west a guy by the name of Steve Baker was part of that team. Go ahead, Stuart. Last couple of items.
Yeah, we've got Henry DeGao. He was just pointing out he was in that race in '85, and he wanted to know if Alan had noticed him scattered across the track at turn 3. So I think Alan had pointed out he recognized Randy Renfro, but we don't know if he recognized Henry as well.
No, I didn't. No, I remember seeing. I have a recollection of seeing Randy, off the track in turn 3. He came back on because in the results he finished fourth.
Fourth, yep.
Yeah. So I think that's actually now it's coming back a little bit. I remember seeing Randy go off track, and that was my opportunity to win because he was actually ahead of me. He was in the lead, and then I took the lead and ended
Rest
up.
is history.
Yeah.
Stuart, anything else?
Yeah, I just got a couple. Just Mark Jeffrey saying thank you to Alan and Stu for joining us this evening. Love the memories and the stories. And Phil Mahood has, I think it's for Alan. He's asking, he met Alan about 7 years ago at Chateau des Charmes, and it's a winery in Niagara on the Lake, and he was riding an MV Agusta.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, yes, I was riding. It was a 1,000cc Brutale or something like that. But it was a loaner. It was a motorsports that wanted me to. Well, I tried his bike. I think he was trying to sell it to me, but I ended up using it because every year, with the exception of this year, every year I usually spend 4 or 5 days in that area because my sister-in-law lives in that area, and they ride motorcycles. So every year, Chantal and I we go there and we go to the wineries and ride bikes all day, and without drinking. Obviously, we only drink when it's all over. But yeah, that was a fun bike. That MV, and very nice bike, MV Agusta.
Well, Alan, it was awesome taking a little walk down memory lane with you and Stuart Shaw. We'll have to do this again sometime. Maybe we'll get you on here with the Bostrom brothers and Pascal Picot and Miguel Duhamel for sort of some kind of a reunion at a future show. Be well, Stuart. Hopefully I can get out to Vancouver at some point. I've not seen you in a long, long time. And our thanks to everyone who joined us on tonight's extended edition of Track Announcer's Notebook. Stuart Nodell, final thoughts?
Yeah, just a quick word. Again, thanking Alan for joining us as well as Stu. Love the stories. And if anyone missed last week's show, go check out the Track Announcers Notebook YouTube channel. We've got an awesome interview with Miguel Duhamel from last week. It was these last 2 weeks have been just a pleasure, a real honor. So thank you.
And this show will be up, about Thursday on our YouTube channel?
Yeah, I get them up on Thursdays. So as soon as I get it up, if you subscribe to the channel, you get notified automatically.
Yeah. And next week, just confirmed earlier today, my good friend Dave Despain, the former voice of AMA road racing. Dave did some announcing up here in Canada as well. Had an opportunity to announce with him at Daytona. Of course, from there, he went on to an illustrious career in motor racing, and of course, his famous wind tunnel show that ran on Sunday nights. We'll reminisce with Dave Despain next Monday night on Track Announcers Notebook. That should be just a great show as well. So again, our thanks to Alan Labrosse and Stu Shaw, as well as my co-host and producer, Stuart Nodell. Be safe, be well, and we'll see you next Monday night for the next edition of Track Announcers Notebook.